Bobby Fi and Brandon Cruz. We're going to be talking a little MLB and probably more NBA showdown because that's going to be more interesting. I'm going to keep the MLB pretty short and sweet. There's 5 games. It's a small slate. There's not a lot going on here. I'm going to the Dodger game tonight. That's why I'm in LA on the road here. So I'm not playing many lineups. I am playing one, medium, well, I guess one large size lineup. It's not particularly warm down here, but I will be stacking the Dodgers. I don't understand why the ownership isn't higher. I understand it's a semi-bullpen game. I think it's the most logical thing to do on this slate. I'm also going to be playing plenty of Glass now for the Dodgers. Other stacks, the most popular I expect to be Houston, some combination of Houston and Philadelphia. I like the other side. I would personally go Mets. And I like the Houston side. I just think the ownership's a little bit much for me to get to. It's a 5-game slate. We've seen Houston disappoint over and over again. Maybe it's a time not to get on the mega, what I think is going to be more Houston chalk than maybe the projections currently say. It'll be Houston and Philadelphia. So I'm trying to avoid stacking those. like I said, the Dodgers, Houston, and I like the Mets, but I prefer Houston as 4 men or less. On as far as pitching goes, I love Justin Steele, and he is the most obvious pitcher outside of Glass now. I think it's a little dangerous to play with a guy who hasn't really thrown more than 85 pitches. I feel similarly about Javier, but the matchup is probably a little better, although the talent's a little less. I don't really feel great about any SP2, to be honest with you. I'm willing to almost forego it. I think that if I had to make a pick, I'm saying using a relief pitcher, it's probably a little too thin on this slate. I think if I had to make a pick, it would be like Quintana at 5,100 just because he's a capable pitcher. And maybe Criswell, but again, the pitch count, it's just the ownership. I would prefer Javier, I guess, over Steele, even though you'll never probably hear me say those words again. And again, I don't think you need to stack, but most of my hitters would be coming from the Dodgers, Houston, the Mets. I don't mind both sides of Tampa Bay, and I don't love the hitting weather, considering that it's Wrigley. It's about it. I'm sorry, that it's Fenway. It's about as bad as it gets. 56 degrees, 10 miles an hour blowing in from center. Still a good hitter's park. And as far as the Cubs ownership, I don't mind a Cubs stack. I think they're going to be low owned because people are sort of hedging the Jared Jones situation. So I guess the Cubs would be next, I guess a little bit ahead of the Fenway guys. But that's essentially what I'd be doing for this slate. It's Ohtani bobblehead night here in LA for what it's worth. I know he's going to have some ownership, but I'm actually expecting the Dodgers to be a little bit lower owned, especially we don't have their lineup yet. So I just think there's, just throwing out everything that I'm doing, and I'm not playing a bunch, but it's going to be all based on those teams. I was going to play one lineup, but now that I started talking about it, I think I'm going to play a couple different sets. So, Brandon, how you doing? We're going to talk some NBA showdown. Talk about what's going on for you. What are you up to this weekend?
So, or this weekend or today?
Okay. Start with today, and then we can maybe elaborate to this weekend.
Well, at least today. Well, actually, so I'm not doing any of the 2-gamers that go over, 2 days. Since yesterday was pretty much the last 2-game NBA slate, and I just didn't like it. I didn't end up playing it, so I think my 2-gamers are done for the season. Especially after coming off of 4 slates in a row of having great lines chasing, and then just not losing anything. But that honestly burned me out. I'm going through a week of that, and then finishing 99th in the main GPP on Tuesday or Monday, whatever it was this week. I was like, okay, I'm done with NBA. I'm burned out. I did 4 in a row. And then we got the NASCAR All-Star race going on, so I got 2 live shows on this weekend, one Saturday and one Sunday. But nice. I'm really looking forward to talking about this slate here because I think it's a really, really fun one, just from the pricing aspect of Jokic being at 14. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to. I also have this in light mode because I don't have a ring light, so this is my backlight, the camera setup. But at least for me, what I was planning to do is kind of just go over my build and just me going through and kind of building, because I'm playing 20 and everything but the 20, because I don't just feel like throwing 400 into that content, right? But everything else, the 4, the 8, the 6, the 5, I'll be throwing 20 in those. And so I figured I'd kind of just go through. And especially since we have Conley, who's most likely going to play, we don't have to wait for any late night news or anything. I can just get all that stuff done and just be done for the night.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, wait, wait, did we get the official announcement on Conley?
I mean, we see that a lot of his props across the board are going towards like the overs. Like he's very favorited to get like near like 6 assists, 7 assists. There was talk about him most likely playing about like 2.5 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't foresee him not making the game today.
Yeah, it's a an elimination. I could definitely I expect him to play. I don't necessarily expect him to be himself. So I would be taking all the unders on him personally. That's just my take. Uh, I think that if he was hurt enough, as a tough of a guy, as good of a guy as he is, this is like the best like person in the NBA every year, best teammate of the year he won this year. From every player in the NBA, that's not just from one team, like that's everyone. He will play if he's able to, so he'll go out there. I don't necessarily think that means that he's capable of playing 37 minutes. So I do think like speculating on the other guys in this game who would benefit, Nickeil Alexander-Walker being the most obvious, who's already a reasonable play as it is. I think that the thinner ones that will get no ownership in Showdown would be a guy like Monty Morris, a potential for Kyle Anderson. Those would be the Showdown guys that I think benefit from, even if he plays. I think it's still worth speculating on how healthy he's going to be. So that's my take.
So since I'm not importing any projections either from Sheets or Goldie, I'm just using the SaberSim stuff. I'm perfectly fine with him being at 26 when I end up running stuff. I don't think that's crazy. I don't think he's going to hit value at all. I mean, he's still injured.
But what do you think about what I'm saying? Because I think that there's a chance that that's how you win. Like the same way I said last night. We were doing the show with Sheets, and on the early slate, I said I'm not doing the early slate, but if there was one thing to do, it would be Marcus Morris, as your guy. Like, and it was the thing I was trying to do, but I couldn't do it, the shifting and the pivoting and learning how to make sure all that works. But I feel like there's Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who is that guy if he's out. I mean, if he's not fully himself. Meanwhile, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, where he would be captain, what was he like? 11% the other night. He's projected to be owned at less than 1% as a captain. Why can't he have a similar role? And Conley just goes out there and tries to gut it out, but can't. Not only can't, but does play, but like is limited to some capacity. On top of it, Nickeil Alexander-Walker also will play with Connolly. Now, they did raise Nickeil Alexander-Walker's price, which I think is the reason why this is so tough. But he's going to be like, I don't know, just an unowned captain play that I think is worth speculating on. And I think it's worth taking some shots on Monty Morris as a utility player. You get that minimum thing, and I think he's going to, he'll get owned a tiny bit, but it's going to be like sub 15%. So those are plays that I'm looking at speculating on tonight. What are you looking at in general?
So that's why I wanted to do. I'm going to actually just bump these guys up a little bit so they are forced into stuff. So what I'm going to do from this is one. I mean, Jokic at 14. He's expected to be like 20, anywhere from like 18 to 23 in the captain. I don't see him working based on the pricing. I think you got to deal with a lot of duplication if you're running Jokic captain. But what I want to see here, and if you have SaberSim through us, which I would suggest you get it through us, this is typically what I do. So like the first part is I'm going to build these lineups, and I specifically want to see the and at this point I'm just building 5,000 just because I want to be able to view and look through as many lineups as possible regarding the captains. I'm going to assume that just on the outside looking in, it's going to give me maybe not even like I'm not going to run the Sims yet, but some of the higher projected lineups would probably end up having either Porter. Certainly going to have Jokic, but I'm not playing those. But I want to see how close they're comparing to the other ones. But probably Cat and Jamal Murray would probably be the most likely captains I'm going to see here. And I'm also going to assume that we're not going to see Conley in a lot of them. So regardless of what your opinion or what my opinion would be on Conley, I think I have to default to what Bobby just said because I just don't foresee Conley getting a lot of my lineups.
But see, I wouldn't play Conley in the flex as much, but I would be willing to take a gamble at captaining him. You know what I mean? That's the way I would look at Conley tonight, personally. Sorry.
What contest are you playing in, or do you
Just
plan on?
just the big showdown one.
Okay. I don't
But
know.
I'm not. I don't have a ton invested, just to be honest. I think there's a couple. I mean, there's the other side, which is the other part of what I wanted to talk about speculating on, which is that you have this Christian Braun that I haven't had a great run, but I've been right about a few things. And Christian Braun, like, not only was right, but the reasoning was right. It's sound. They want him to guard Edwards one-on-one when it becomes that point of time. I think he's my number one captain, to be honest with you. You know, and then my goal is to try to get into to make sure I have Jokic, Edwards, and if I'm not playing Christian Braun, I'd like to play Michael Porter Jr. also as the potential captain, along with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, for different reasons. Because if the Nuggets are down, I do think, like, let's say they're down 10, in the fourth or with 5 minutes to go, then you'll see Michael Porter Jr. more likely than Christian Braun on the court. If the game is back and forth, you'll probably see Christian Braun more likely than Michael Porter Jr. Or there's also the chance of Aaron Gordon foul trouble, KCP foul trouble, basically anybody else on the team foul trouble. But that's the way I'm looking at this, as like I said in the last game, the range of minutes, even on the high end for SaberSim, was lower than what Christian Braun played, because I could see what they were doing. If the game is close, they're putting him on Edwards, especially if they're playing from ahead. If they're playing from behind, it's going to be Michael Porter Jr. because they need their best shooter on the court. But also there's a chance Aaron Gordon, who's been in foul trouble in the past, gets in foul trouble and both of them play. My point is that I would most likely to try to pick one or the other, whether it's flex or captaining. But I think they both make for great captains for different reasons, because they're price points. Michael Porter Jr. could legitimately be the highest scoring player on the slate. Other than Jokic, but he has a chance. He could score 60 in a game. Whereas Christian Braun might be a value that can get you 30, that allows you to get in all the studs that you want. So those are the things that I'm mostly playing on.
What do you think about Gordon's usage rate in this series versus the last one?
I don't factor in his usage. I watched every game in this series so far. I won't watch the one tonight because I'll be at the Dodger game. But from everything I've seen, I think Aaron Gordon is an awesome basketball player that will be used whatever way is best for each game. I saw it last year in the Lakers series when they swept them. There were 2 games where I think he had like 10 fantasy points and he played like 40 minutes. And there was another game where he had 70 fantasy points and he played, the same amount, whatever. He played every minute. He's just a do all the right things real life basketball player, and will take advantage of circumstances. The difference in this series about his usage and everything, the usage numbers are a little skewed because he's bringing the ball up the court a lot. So a lot of times his entry pass might be to Jokic, who might decide to immediately take a 3 or take one dribble and he gets the assist or whatever for that. So that counts as some of his usage, but that's really just him bringing up the ball up the court, which he's going to do because they have trouble with the Minnesota pressure when Murray brings it up with the wing pressure. My guess is Minnesota will adjust tonight and do the same thing to him and make Jamal Murray try to beat them in some senses. I think the Minnesota is going to throw a lot of different looks at them. I don't think we could take what's happened with I love Gordon as a player. Like I said, I really love him. I respect him. I think he's an ultimate basketball player. I will not expect these same fantasy outputs that he's put up the last 2 days. And I don't think that should be expected as the norm. I would much rather take a chance on a guy like Michael Porter Jr. at lower ownership, who I think is actually the better play if you really want to take a chance to try to win a tournament, even though none of the numbers of what's happened in this series would tell you that. So like I said, but again, it goes against my Christian Braun take. It just depends on which way you see the game going. If you see Denver winning and controlling the game, play Christian Braun, captain, play him everywhere. If you see it as, or if you want to just go both sides of it, if you see it as, Denver's playing from it's Michael Porter Jr. will probably stay on the court because he's the one who pushes them way ahead with the second unit in the fourth quarters. It just depends on what kind of game flow it is. So it's really hard to know, but I feel like taking a shot and like splitting up those guys and making them heavily featured in every one of the lineups the other one's not in is something I would focus on tonight.
I gotcha. So typically, what I do at this point, now that I've ran all these lineups, and yet again, this is for just so I can go through and look through everything. So I just brought up the first 500, and right off the bat, we see that Jokic is in the majority of these of the highest projected lineups, which in terms of DFS, um, like I said, his ownership, at least on SaberSim's, looking at like 28% in the captain. But when you start looking through these lines, and this isn't, I built specifically not to use the full salary. And when I start looking through, we have a lot of lineups that are very much stuck using still, 48 or 49.8, 49.4s, 49.6s and stuff. And so, yet again, we're still going through and we're having Jokic actually, he drops off quite a lot. So this is one thing that I like to look at. So this is just based on SaberSim's projected scores on these lines, not simmed or anything. He's in the highest, second highest, third, fourth, fifth, seventh, eighth, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. And the reason why I'm saying that out loud is looking at where the gaps start to form. So like here we have a pretty significant gap between his lineups from 23rd to 32nd to 33rd, 43rd. And so there are quite a lot of lineups in between here that don't have Jokic in here. And we see that Jokic is very much falling in line. Like now he's, very much holding a lot of the 70s, a lot of the 80s, a lot of the 90s. Anyway, the reason I'm looking at that is just another reason why personally I would not be playing Jokic in the captain here, because you're going to get a lot of high projected lineups based on projected score and probably on the sim ROI category of that. But a lot of these lines will be showing up regardless of what factor you're using to like sort your lineups or whatever. And so what I want to look at specifically is who is in those areas that Jokic isn't here. And so we have Murray, Towns, Holiday, Edwards. We do have a Christian Braun, which I'm very hesitant on playing personally for me, cheaper captains in this. It's not that they necessarily have to go off for it, but when we're looking at ceiling upside, I mean, the floor is certainly lower for cheaper captains, but when I'm looking at like a ceiling projection, like when we're trying to chase like the ceiling lines, they typically fall just like short. If we're looking at like the top 1% to 2% lineups in contest, typically the values are just not at the very top. They can get up to like the top 2%, but we typically don't see them winning contests and stuff. But at least for me,
let me just correct one thing though. Part of the reason you don't see them winning contests is it's not what people do. When 95% of people are doing one thing, it's like 5-man stacking in baseball. It's like I have this conversation every day. People are like, "Well, why do you think 5-mans win the most often?" Well, because 95% of lineups play them. That's the truth. It's really hard to thread the needle. I'm saying if you're trying to beat a bazillion people, trying to win a showdown or chop a showdown, taking a stance like Marcus Morris last night is the example. When there is this volatility and there's a chance that Minnesota runs slightly different guys out there, maybe they play Kyle Anderson more than Gobert tonight. Like who knows? Or not more than Gobert minutes wise, but like more minutes of Gobert's. There's a lot of different things that could take place, and I think in these showdowns it's worth speculating on. And there have been a million basketball showdowns that happen in the playoffs in the past, and including in the title, that people have won single with these speculation plays in the captain, because it allows you to get in Jokic, Edwards, and you're counting on a big game from Edwards in that case. I don't think the thing is, you must play, in my opinion, one of Edwards or Towns or Reed, at least one of those three, obviously, probably two. And then you have to play Jokic pretty much no matter what. But I don't think, like you were saying, I don't think you can captain Jokic and be profitable long run unless you're max entering, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
Unless you just heavily unless you just like play Jokic across the board, like the only way that you would probably be profitable in long term playing Jokic here, and even then it'd be pretty sketchy, is played him in the captain and just hoping that like the chalk just absolutely crushes, and even then you're still going to be tying with a ton of people. So I just think that's negative EV play. So what I'm doing here is I go through, and what I did was I initially removed the guys that are most likely not to work in the captain. I know I took out the highest guy of Conley, but we've both kind of just spoken out loud that I don't Bobby thinks he isn't 100%. I just don't think he works salary wise in the captain. Like I think more guys outscore him. And so when I'm looking at the guys who are left to truly compete today in the top 500 projected, actually this is single game. I need to change it to projected score here. When I'm looking at my pool now, we have Edwards, Towns, Braun, Holiday, Murray, Naz Reid, Conley. What I'm doing now is I want to see who's at the top at this point. And Anthony Edwards, Holiday are popping off or showing up right now. And this is with pretty much 100% Jokic in the flex. So this indicates to me that I probably need to just play 100% Jokic. Yet again, I don't just get to that conclusion just like entering a slate of like, oh, I'm going to be 100% on this guy. Just I do this stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this shows that I probably just need to play Jokic and move on from there. And so what are the totals? Why is Minnesota favored to win this game?
This is a very good question, but it's also a similar question that people asked when they said, why are Denver only 3-point underdogs? Or I think it ended at 2.5 after going into game 3 in Minnesota after losing 2 at home. It's an interesting question. I have a very tough stance on this. I picked Denver in 7 before I wrote it all my predictions. I also had Dallas in 7 against OKC. So look, it may not be in the exact number of games. I think Denver has proven they're a better team. Do I think Minnesota and Edwards specifically Edwards can take over and get a game at home? I absolutely do. I think that crowd is going to be insane. I just think that I look at Jokic and he's a robot. He's not forget the fantasy element. He's the best at doing his job basically of anybody I've ever seen other than Michael Jordan at any sport. Maybe Tiger Woods. He's perfect. But they're going to have an off night here and there, and they make series longer than they should sometimes. They've been in many of these 7-game series throughout their different playoff appearances before they won their title. This is a spot where I would have a very hard time betting, but just the fact that you tell me out loud, and I'm just thinking like Denver, just bet Denver to win. At the same time, part of me really does think Minnesota is going to win tonight. But thinks Minnesota is it's going to be a really toss-up-y game. In that case, I usually trust Jokic, but I also trust Anth. He's just 22 years old. That's the only thing. It's a really good series anyway.
And they're in Minnesota, correct?
They're in Minnesota.
Okay, so the reason I'm looking at that point is so typically at this point, once I have everybody through, and the reason why I ask why is Minnesota favored here is because typically here you would want to play, at least what I do is play a favorite, like have your captain be from the favorite of the two teams. That's why I was just
right.
Outside.
Yeah, it's the different type of captains, and that was what I was saying about the Christian Braun captain. So I understand you're saying it's hard with the points, but if Christian Braun plays 28 minutes again and those 25 fantasy points turn into 32, and Jokic doesn't have to score, 77 like he did last time, he scores 60, and you get Edwards who scores 60, let's say, Towns who can also get 50, you know what I mean? You actually could end up with the nuts because you saved the money so you could afford to play all 3 of those guys. That's a situation that it appeals to me. I also like the Michael Porter Jr. on the flip side of it, where even if Denver's playing from ahead or behind, if they go on a burst to start the end third, beginning fourth with Porter Jr., because he's the one who's out there, then it might be him on the court. And he and Braun both might be on the court. But I'm just saying that I like those 2 as captains because they're going to be very, very different choices, and they allow you to get in either the Jokic, Edwards, Towns, or Jokic, Edward, Naz Reid. Because if Towns gets in foul trouble, and I'm just Xing personally, I don't care if it hurts me. I'm not playing that many lineups, but I'm not playing Rudy Gobert at all. And I am totally fine with it. It's actually a good spot to, if I played him, I would only captain him. I have no interest in playing him as a regular player. I'm looking for an angle of how the game is going to be played, Mm-hmm. And he doesn't necessarily fit in. If I'm Denver, if I'm Minnesota and my back's against the wall, Rudy Gobert is playing like 20 minutes tonight at most. I am not letting my hopes die with Rudy Gobert when they're better with Naz Reid on the court. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I fully agree with you in that. I would not want to play Gobert. Anyways, I kind of walk through what I do here. They're thinking from like a DFS contest perspective, and it's yet again going back to why is Minnesota the favorite here? Just in my head, looking at the builds or assuming like I would lean towards a Denver Nugget being the captain you want to play. Now, at this point, I haven't removed anybody from the pool. I just ran the sims at this point to see where people would come in at, and we saw that when I sorted it by that, we saw Murray, Gordon, and Christian Alt. Actually, here I'll show it. So I had a projected score before, and then the reason why I'm showing this is when I sort it by what I sort, you see, Gordon, Murray. I mean, even Walker gained a few positions, but really, I think the main head-to-head lineups tonight are going to be Cat, and Edwards, Jamal, and Aaron Gordon. And it's not just because of what's showing on here, but I think those are the four guys that are most viable to work. I know that we have Holiday and Braun as your higher guys. But two things to note. One, so like, I mean, I still got to figure out what I want to play. But typically, when I go to my 20 lineups or whatever I'm going to play, just speaking out loud, I have found that I just remove the top two highest ROI the top two lineups that are given me from SaberSim, because those lineups just like never do anything. I think those are the worst lineups that you could have in your
Oh, I like
portfolio.
this take. I like this.
And so personally, that is what I've been doing, especially in NBA. I mean, I'm not done yet. Like these aren't the lines I'm running, but I always remove the top two highest lineups, because when I put them in the contest and watch them, how they perform, and then I look at them once the slate is over, those are absolutely horrific lineups. And I've started doing that in every sport I play. That's just something that I do. But when we're looking at the top 500 here, and I still say it's between these guys. Um, and especially when I start going through. So yet again, I'm very judgmental of these two. I mean, not just because it's like, oh, this is a risk-adjusted ROI of 441% or whatever. These lines just haven't ended up doing anything for me personally whenever I look at them. But when we start getting past like the Holiday and the Braun, yet again, we get back to Towns, Murray, Gordon. I mean, we got a Naz Reid in there, a Towns, another Naz Reid, another Braun. But once we start getting, let's look at like the 20s and 30s here, you start getting a lot of Murray, a lot of Walker. Or not a lot of Walker, but anyway, go ahead. What were you
I'm
saying?
trying. Yeah, no. I hear. So let's just think something out here, like, because in these closeout games in basketball, what usually happens is you're gonna get your big games out of your big guys. It is tough for Murray to get off in this series. Like that's the truth, and it's not a win or go home for them. I just think the Jokic raw points you can't give up. I'm willing to give up Murray's and take shots with Porter Jr. and Gordon or whatever instead. But I think the main thing is like I'm going to only captain cheap people today. That's it. It's going to be Naz Reid. It's the only one I wouldn't. It'd be Towns. He's always much worse at home. Oh, and Porter Jr. I guess is not cheap, but I'm going to play like Kyle Anderson as captain because I'm speculative of what Minnesota might do. I'm aware of these changes, what happens in these games, and I just think that it's like important. Kyle Anderson played and was a huge part. He put up 34 fantasy points in game 2 without Gobert. Now, I'm just saying it's a must-win game. He's 30 whatever hundred. If I can play Jokic, Edwards, and Towns, and McDaniels and Nikhil Alexander Walker, who also works into the Conley isn't 100% narrative, or I can play Braun and Naz Reid with those guys, or Caldwell Pope like that. Those all sound like good lineups that are just so far off the board that you get in the best 4 players and you hope that, one, something weird happens, or that, look, they just make an adjustment just the same way that, Cleveland had players out last night. So it's a little bit different, but the same way that Oklahoma City did by starting Isaiah Joe. Now, I know he didn't get there, but the point is that people are going to make adjustments in these crucial games in the playoffs. And I would rather live and die by speculating with the cheap adjustments that are already going to get some playing time and maybe a ton, especially when there's an injury involved, and then use it so I can make sure I get all of my top guys in. Because I don't think you're going to see another 25 fantasy point game from Anthony Edwards. I just think you want to try to get Edwards, Jokic in the same way you would try to get Brunson or let's say in the next series you try to get, I don't know, let's say Brunson and either Halliburton or Siakam or whatever in this last series. Last series is a weird one, but you see what I'm saying though, right?
Mm-hmm. I totally see.
And Naz Reid is my favorite captain, for what it's worth. There's so many angles that play works. Doesn't need to be a blowout. Doesn't need to be anything. Doesn't need to be foul trouble. All these also work too. I just think he's my favorite captain because he could legitimately score 45 fantasy points, and you can play a Jokic and Edwards with that. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? These are my takes. Please don't let it influence your decision too much.
No, I mean, I'm more so just kind of think. So from what I've seen so far is I don't have the lean on one specific captain, and I probably won't go all in on a specific captain. I'm trying to figure out what I personally want to do in terms of ownership between Cat, Murray, Gordon, and Edwards. Because I don't think, I mean, so at this point so now, yet again, we're using SaberSim contest results here. Typically, I don't want to see, so this is how I use the Sims as well. I don't want to see my bottom lineup. And yet again, I built a pool of 5,000 for a reason, because I mean, I didn't use that as the build, but I don't want to see my bottom lineups probably any higher than like rank like 300 or so. Ideally, I want to try and get all my lineups today to be within the top probably 120 lineups. I mean, the lowest so far right now is 65, but that's another way, or that's another thing I personally do. Like I always go through and look at the bottom lineups that are thrown in there. I don't want anything higher than like 300. So whenever you're running the Sims and you're like, and you see, you've made your unique mins or whatever the heck you do, and then you look at your bottom ranking and this lineup's ranked like 822nd. That's a dead line. There's no reason to play those types of lineups. And so now when I'm looking at like my top 20 that I would play and enter at this point, Holiday is at the very top, which is always concerning, because that's like the highest projected, or that's like one of the two lineups that Saberson's giving me. And his next lineup would probably be, this is probably at the bottom since I was at 63, probably like 15 or probably 13th lineup right now. And so I'm probably going to remove Holiday from that. And I want to see what that's doing. So we're very much 30% on everybody here. I want to take a quick look. I know you said you like Naz Reid. I'm assuming that he's only in 4.
So I like the idea. So I think you have to play Reid, Edwards, or Towns. I know it sounds stupid and obvious, but yes, play at least one. I would prefer Edwards with one of either Reid or Towns. I guess, or Gobert if you're playing like 150. I'm not getting to the Gobert thing because I'm taking a stand on what I think Minnesota actually should do. I understand the plus minus works in Gobert's favor. What about the one game that he was out? How does this actually look to the eye test? Any person who knows basketball will tell you this team, there's just no chance that he can guard Jokic one-on-one. Jokic's numbers versus him one-on-one would be the best numbers for any player versus any player in the history of basketball. And it's been true from the beginning. It's completely useless. He should play 20 minutes, in my opinion. That's not necessarily going to happen. Obviously, it's really not going to happen. But I just would rather err on the side of what will happen is I do think that they need the offensive firepower of Reid, Towns, Edwards. Those are their 3 best offensive players. They cannot play defense to beat this team because as good as they play, the best offensive orchestrator ever is on the other side, So I'm just saying what I think is going to happen. I'm speculating on that. I nailed it the other night. I didn't get it. I didn't have it didn't work in the right spots quite enough, but the Christian Braun being my second highest owned player at 50% when he was like, 10% or 9% on the 2-gamer when he was unowned as a captain and it almost got there. Like there's a method to the madness, but you have to figure out what's going to happen with, or the potential outcomes. For me, that's how I'm successful. You guys are going on a different you're going a lot on game theory, which is really interesting. And it's something I could probably, if we could find the combination between the two of us, we would have sheets. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
we would have something like that,
Yeah.
I have to run in
And
just a minute, though,
yeah,
unfortunately.
no, you're good. I mean, I'm almost done. I just, like I said, I kind of want to use this to more talk through everything that I do since we were going to be here for like half an hour. So the last thing that I did here was I've just looking at my stuff. I'm probably going to play Cat and Gordon as my two captains tonight. Comparing, so what I was doing while you were talking was just looking at the drafts, looking at the minor differences between once I've removed all the captains that I've identified that I either don't want or that I don't think is going to have a real chance and stuff. I then started looking at how close or how not close or how different they were, but the different exposure between the highest projected lineups at this point and then the sim resulted lineups, and it was showing that I should probably just remove Jamal Murray. So like through all this conclusion, I was like, okay, so Jamal Murray is probably not viable in terms of me for a captain. We have identified that Anthony Edwards probably isn't going to work in the captain. Jamal Murray, like it's unlikely that those guys are going to be the highest scoring guys, and so at this point, now I'm at with just Cat and Gordon as my last two um, lineups. And so I'm going to do everything that I just said here. And so now we're at the point of my lowest lines. Like I said, I don't really want this to be higher than whatever number I just stated. Totally went blank, but like I'm perfectly fine with 141,
Mhm.
127. The last thing that I'm going to do personally is, as I said, well, I'm going to remove the highest lineups, but I'm going to do min two or minimum two uniques. And what's always interesting is seeing how the exposure between the captains change. Like now it's leaning slightly more Towns because we're just getting different
Yeah.
like that. And so as I build, I'm like, well, that kind of more leans like once I've done all these steps, then it's like, man, that's really leaned to like Carl Anthony Towns being a guy that I probably would consider. And so this is probably a bad principle,
No,
but I
I
just
don't,
want
I don't think it is actually. And what I was saying before is if I was going to captain anybody that was not my cheap guys, Towns would be my favorite. Jamal Murray, just because of ownership and opportunity, would be my second favorite. I just couldn't do the Edwards and Jokic thing and profitably expect myself to win unless I had a Monty Moore. The only way you play Jokic or Edwards is with like Monty Morris and another weird play and Nikhil Alexander Walker in the same lineup with 2,000 on the table. That's the only way you're going to win with those kind of captains. So I like the idea of narrowing the field and taking a shot with Towns, who has the chance to be the highest scoring player, and so does Murray. But more, I would lean on Towns. I just happen to go with Naz Reid, who's not going to be the highest scoring player, but he's what happens if Towns gets in foul trouble. He's what happens when you need offense and Gobert comes out. He's going to be the guy playing the Townsy role. You know what I mean? They're sort of the same kind of player. It's just that anyway. That's sort of my narrative. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to
no,
interrupt
you're good. And then I'll be done in like next 3 minutes. And so lastly, at this point, what I do is so personally, I don't play 5-1s. Just I I have not found success playing 5-1s in NBA Showdown. So at this point I remove those. And then at this point I will go up and yet again take away the top two lines that Saberson has given me. And at that point, these are the 20 lines I'm going to play. I don't know the I don't know exposure. I don't know what exposure I have to people. The only thing that is concerning is actually no, that was Conley. I thought this was Conley. I don't know why. So let's see. He's in 4 lineups. That's fine. I need min uniques too, so that's okay. I'm gonna get people I don't want. Morris, I'll live with Morris not being in the pool. Who's at the bottom? Michael Porter Jr. I'm fine with that. And so this is going to be my exposure rate for the games tonight with uh 15 lineups with Towns and 5 with Aaron Gordon. Like this is my entire process for NBA Showdown. Now typically if I felt more comfortable with this game, I mean this is a game 6. Like I said, I don't think that Minnesota should be the favorite. This is
I agree with
typically
you.
this is typically where I would probably, if I was more comfortable on the slate, I'd probably go 100% Cat here. But just due to the uncertainty of this slate, I'm going to keep it 15 Cat, 5.
Can I also throw one thing out? It may not matter to you,
Yeah.
but over the last 2 seasons, in which is basically the only seasons where it's been a similar type of team in Minnesota. Cat, for whatever reason, averages 10 less fantasy points per game at home. This is not an exaggeration, or I think it's 8. It's 8.5 to 10, and somewhere in that range. This year, I think it was 10. Last year it was like 7 and whatever. It's there's a for whatever reason he plays much worse at home. He's like an excitable kid. You don't watch the basketball, but like that's my only fear of the Cat thing. Even though again, he is the only one of the spend ups other than Porter that I'm using.
I got you. Well, I mean, at that point, then I could just be mad at the process. Like, I don't.
No, I think your process
yeah,
is super sound.
yeah.
That's why I don't want to talk you
personally,
off of any of it. I'm just throwing out my, my takes
Yeah.
again. Like I said, if you combine us, we can be sheets. I'm telling you, man, we can do it.
Mhm. Yeah.
No,
No, it's always funny because I will have people like tell me that, like, oh, this guy throws like his air yards in open stadiums
oh
are
God,
way
don't.
more, and I'm like, I don't even acknowledge that stuff. Like,
I know.
but this is exactly what I do for every NBA slate. Even if it's like classic, like a 2-gamer, I do the exact same thing, and I just look at how the lineups are building and stuff. I usually feel more comfortable if I'm inputting either Goldie's or Sheets' projections in than Saberson, just because I find more.
You get different variants too.
Yeah, you do. Than everybody on Sabersim using the same stuff. But even here, like, I've gone through so many things, I'm not super concerned about it. And it's NBA Showdown, like, we're gonna have duplications anyway. But this is everything that I personally do. So
No, I think it's really
I'm pretty
helpful.
much done if you are.
No, yeah, and just to close on that though, like Brandon, I thought that was really, really helpful. I thought it was really interesting, just you going through your process, guys. I really hope you saw Sheets going through his yesterday and helping me try to go through a new process for me yesterday. But in general, like there's like a lot of great stuff we got going on over here at TrueDFS. We do have some free trials going on, so just please check it out. Please give us the thumbs up. We really appreciate it. And Brandon, thanks so much, man. I really, really do appreciate that. And I think that just so you guys know, Brandon has done very well in these NBA showdowns, and I'm often jealous going, what the hell did I do wrong? I know what's going on in this sport, and Brandon has no idea. Meanwhile, he's dominating, and he's always like up near the top with a sweat, and I'm like literally praying to break even. Anyway, Brandon, appreciate having you, man.
Yeah, hopefully it works. I mean, this will certainly be where I'll be tilted if Cat is just playing playing terrible.
It's one of those things.
Yeah.
Just make sure. Yeah, this the Nas Reed hedge. No, I'm just kidding around.
Yeah, no, it's only money,
Yeah. Well, happy Friday, everybody. Good luck, and hopefully you see one of the TrueDFS members. I'm rooting for Brandon because he's probably playing a few more lineups. I didn't play that many tonight. And then I'm rooting for all you guys as well. So I'll be in the Discord if anybody else has anything. I'm sure Brandon will be around there as well. So good luck to everybody, and stay tuned.